All right, shall we give it a try? Good morning, everyone, from our side, from Carole-Anne, Yixian, and my side as co-conveners of this task force. And it's a quite informal meeting, so maybe different to the meetings before. We now have not a webinar, we have a Zoom normal meeting, so to say. Maybe there are better words for this. But so we can actually, if you want, switch on our videos that we can see each other. But it's of course up to you. So we welcome you to this meeting and would like to start with the presentation of what we have in mind for this meeting. So you see it hopefully on the slide. That's our agenda for today. We have 1.5 hours roughly. And first of all, we would like to check in, and then we aim to look back at the past Global Goals 2024 event in, what was it, the end of August. It seems so far away, but it's still actually not so far away. And we also would like to talk about survey results. We did a survey at this occasion, and several of you have participated in this event. And after that, we aim to take stock and setting the scene for the general discussion. And the main thing is today that we would like you also to talk and give feedback to our current structure. So as most of you know, we had a working group structure with 5 and now 6 working groups. We will briefly present that also. And we are now in the moment to reconsider whether this is the best way to go. And we have 3 different options to talk about. And we have also time in the group, perhaps breakout groups, smaller groups, to discuss the possible restructuring of the task force and the working groups. And then we also have a discussion how we envision the future of the SDGs. And then we wrap up and look forward. That's the plan for today. And good to see so many of you here in this room. Maybe it's nice to make a very brief check-in before we look back to what happened in Utrecht. Maybe you can say your name, because some also, I think, are new. Some people are new. Just your name and your affiliation. I can start. So I'm Thomas Hickmann at Lund University. And then I will nominate another person to do it, because I think the order is different for everyone. So I nominate Veronica.
Hello, good morning. So my name is Veronica de Wit, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Utrecht University. And I nominate Laura Ram.
Hi, wonderful to see you all. My name is Laura Ram. I'm a Jean Monnet Fellow at the European University Institute in Florence. Let me see, I nominate Joanna.
Thanks, Laura. I'm Joanna Stanberry, and I am a Sustainability Research Fellow at the University of Cumbria in Northwest England. And I nominate Fred Dahlman.
Hi, everyone. Fred Dahlman at WBS in Warwick Business School in the UK, and I'm interested in the private sector governance of the SDGs. Who can I nominate here? John Thompson, next on my list.
I'm John Thompson. I'm a Senior Fellow Institute of Development Studies and the Deputy Director of Sussex Sustainability Research Program. Let me hand over to Feng Mao.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Feng Mao, and I am an Associate Professor of Global Sustainable Development at the University of Warwick. So very nice to see you all, and I would nominate Chen Kit.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chen Kit. I'm a Senior Lecturer and Program Director for Bachelor of Political Science and Open News Malaysia. And also at the same time, I'm also a PhD candidate, which my PhD thesis focusing on global citizenship education. So I would like to nominate perhaps Massimo.
Hi everyone, Massimo. I'm part of Co-Regenerate, an organization which works at the intersection between academia and practice, and that's where our main focus is and interest is here. situated in Switzerland, and we were part of the Global Goals 2024 conference, which was very nice and insightful. Yeah, so hi everyone, and I would give over to Teresa Jett.
Hi, everyone. Good morning from Munich. I'm at the Technical University of Munich. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the chair of climate and environmental policy, and I teach global environmental governance. I would hand over to Catherine Massam. Okay, how about Melanie Van Driel?
Hello, everyone. My name is Melanie Van Driel. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Amsterdam.
And you nominate someone?
And I nominate Tarek Katramis.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Tarek Katramis, and I'm a professor at the Department of Architecture and Environmental Studies at Shibaura Institute of Technology in Tokyo. Nice to meet you all. I hand over to Mahesti Okitsari.
Everyone, my name is Mahesti Okitsari. You can call me Oki. I work as a researcher at UNUIS, which is also based in Tokyo, Japan. Nice meeting everyone. I would like to sort of like hand over to Michelle Smith.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Michelle Smith. I'm in Canberra, Australia. It's 20 to 8 in the evening here, and I'm an interested bystander. I'd like to hand over to Andrew.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, Andrew Sullivan. I'm also in Australia. I'm in Tasmania at the University of Tasmania. I'm a lecturer, but also studying a PhD looking at global ocean governance and a particular interest in the work of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. So yeah, just joining in as an interested observer as well. And I'll ask Jay. Have you already said hello?
Hi, no, sorry. Hi, I'm Jay. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Bath, studying international development with economics. And as part of my work, I'm helping support the ESG Research Centre there. So I'm just observing. I would have my camera on, but I'm eating my breakfast, so apologies about that. And I'll hand over to Yixian, please.
Hi everyone, Yixian Sun from the University of Bath and also a co-convener of this task force. So I'll invite Clément Laslen.
Hi everyone, I'm Clément Lasselin. I'm a PhD student working on bioenergy governance from the perspective of sustainability sciences. So I'm near to finish my my PhD now, and I'm nominate Andu, or yes, did he already present itself? I don't know. Ah, yes, okay, sorry. It was the wrong Andrew, or Carole-Anne Sénit, so.
Yes, thanks, Clément. My name is Carole-Anne Sénit. I'm a co-convener of this task force, and I'm an assistant professor of inclusive sustainability governance at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development in Utrecht University. And I hand over to Mark Elder.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Elder. I'm at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies in Japan, and I'm a political scientist, and I've been working on SDGs. I'm Director of Research and Publications. And I will hand over to Blake Harvey.
who is the facilitator of the meeting. Not sure whether they can.
Hi,
Yes.
everyone. Yes, Blake Harvey, ESG IPO Network Coordinator. Nice to see you all. I also worked with the SDG Task Force a few years ago. And yeah, I will pass to Catherine. Or to Frank. I don't think he went.
Well, hi, Frank Biermann, also co-convener of the Task Force on Development Goals, and very excited to learn more about the next steps in this task force. And I came a little bit late, so it's difficult for me to nominate somebody. Can somebody?
Carole-Anne, you could take.
Sorry?
Carole-Anne, for instance, I think.
Carole-Anne, perfect.
No, she just did that. So.
Oh, sorry.
I nominate Thomas. No, I don't know anybody who has, I don't know who has been there. Laura Ram, I haven't. Laura, I don't know.
Laura did already.
Then it's, it gets too difficult.
We have Mark, right? Mark Elder.
Mark
No,
Elder has spoken.
fine. I think it's fine. I think everyone introduced him or herself, I think.
I was briefly in the WhatsApp chat with Marianne Beisheim. There seems to be a technical issue because there's another meeting going on with the task force, with 6 people or 7. So maybe Blake, you can try to move them here. I'm not sure where they are actually, because
Yeah, I will find.
I also sent Marianne the link, but she asked for another link per email, which I will do now. But at the same time, maybe you can try to find them and merge these two rooms. We are the bigger ones, so they should come here. I think it's better. All right, but let's then move on, I guess. And thanks for everyone, and I hope we didn't forget anybody. Last moment to do it, but then we can look back, right? That was the first step at our nice Global Goals 2024 event. And here you see the picture. Several of you are in this picture, but we also some new faces. That's also good to have. And at this conference, we talked about promises and pitfalls of governance by goal setting and some conditions, success factors for SDGs to be an effective governance mechanism and knowledge gaps. And we had brief group discussions, but also had like a survey. And now I think I hand over to Carole-Anne to present these essentials of this discussion that was going on at this event and also the survey.
Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, it's very nice to see so many of you today, and also to see so many of you who actually participated to the Global Goals Conference in Utrecht back in August. So yeah, it's great to see our task force growing with new members, not only from academia, but also civil society, and yeah, it's really a global, worldwide network with people joining from very different time zones. So thanks for this. Thanks for your commitment. So can you go to the next? Yeah, thanks, Thomas. So yeah, we had very nice discussions during the afternoon in Utrecht at the conference, and we discussed both the promises and the pitfalls of governance by goal setting. So let me just start with emphasizing what you identified as promises for this type of governance mechanism. One first principle that was mentioned was universality, the fact that, of course, these goals and this normative framework is universal. It encompasses all countries from the global north to the global south. It also allows for civil society to hold different types of actors accountable by looking at the indicators framework and by seizing these indicators to really monitor progress and demand accountability. So as I said, tracking progress. It's also a universal, of course, framework that provides a common language. Both are related. It's a normative framework, an aspirational framework. It sets directions, and it tries to steer action. Not only from governments, but also from non-state actors. Next slides, please. Thanks. But of course, I mean, there are many pitfalls that you identified for this type of governance mechanism and for the SDGs in particular. There's a lack of formal accountability mechanisms. So as you know, the reporting mechanism at the HLPF is voluntary. It's based on peer learning, and there's no accountability mechanism specifically. It's a voluntary framework, as I just said. There's a lack of political will. Issues and debates and discussions are still very much siloed, compartmentalized. So it's a very important framework, a very broad framework, and because it is also voluntary, it allows states and governments and other types of actors, also businesses, to cherry pick the SDGs that are the easiest to reach. It also, very much depends on, or like progress towards the goals, very much depends on election cycles, beyond political will. Some mentioned global-local disconnect, a weak science policy interface, conflicting political agendas, sporadic implementation. This is related to cherry picking as well. And also, and very important point, lack of funding, lack of the broad financing mechanism for the SDGs. Next slide, please. And then the discussion went over to trying to identify conditions, right? What would be the success factors for the SDGs to become a transformative force in governance for sustainability, and what would be reform ideas related to that. So some of you at the meeting were working on public-private partnerships, multi-stakeholder partnerships. So one condition that was identified when it comes to those partnerships for SDG implementation was the longevity of those mechanisms. So accountability here again was mentioned. Another point that I think is very important is that we tend to emphasize the synergies between the goals, but it's also very important to highlight the trade-offs and to identify the trade-offs and identify ways to circumvent or overcome these trade-offs. Knowledge co-production was another condition. Democracy was mentioned during the meeting. Auditing mechanisms to actually increase accountability. More review mechanisms. Another participant also mentioned not only trade-offs between goals, but also trade-offs between countries, right? So what is the impact of SDG implementation in one country on another country? What are the trade-offs and the relationships there? Other mentioned like the need to have more participation mechanisms, the need to redesign the SDGs for better integration, the need for interdisciplinarity, legalization, of course. And yeah, I think that's about it for the conditions. And the next slide, next and last slide. So we also discussed what were the knowledge gaps, right? Related to governance by goals and related to SDG implementation. I remember we discussed, the conditions for success, and some of the participants said, we don't know, we actually don't really know just yet, what are the conditions in different contexts. So I think this is knowledge gap that we also try to address within this task force. We need to also identify what are the successes, the hidden successes someone mentioned. As I said, cross-country impacts, cross-country coordination, how actors use the SDGs in their strategies, what are the perspectives from policymakers on the SDGs, on the 2030 agenda, so that we could better understand political will and how it can be achieved. Cross-border SDG impacts, this I said, SDG interactions, trade-offs, interactions with trade as well, and many other things I'm sure that I miss from the meeting, but just feel free if you have any comments or any additions to just raise your hand. This is a very informal and interactive meeting. But thanks, and I think I hand over now to Yixian, right?
Right. Thanks, Carole-Anne. All right, so I think we have some new members, so like prospective members here. We would like to very briefly mention some key outputs that we have done in the past, and also some ongoing projects organized by our task force. And then I think we did this survey, we mentioned just before this meeting, before the ESG forum this year, to get you a sense what works or what maybe did not work in the past in our task force, and also what kind of activities you want for the future of our task force. So I'm going to then also briefly give you a summary of our survey results, and then we can have a discussion to think about the future activities of our task force, and also how we are going to organize our work together. So very briefly, so the task force started in 2021. Do we want to have the slides?
Sorry, I will go back to them.
Sorry for that.
I think they're back, right?
Okay, cool. Thank you. But actually, I think the foundation of the task force was an impact assessment for the SDGs started in 2020. I think really like during the pandemic, and then the work carried on in 2021, and then after near completion of that project, we decided to keep this group. Then we try to expand to form a task force, and then these outputs were finally published in 2022 as a book by Cambridge University Press, and also we published a Nature Sustainability article to summarize the key findings from this assessment. And then the task force started. We have organized a range of activities, and this conversation and collaboration led us to a series of outputs as well, including a policy forum article published by Science last year. And also we did a scoping article to gather insights from different working groups of our task force and published earlier this year. And then we also try to think about different formats of outputs. For example, when we published the impact assessment, we also did a series of webinars to introduce and summarize the key findings of the assessment. So at the moment, so in the last 2 years, what we try to do is trying to develop new projects, new products for the task force. So at the moment, we have 2 ongoing projects. One is this A to Z guide on the SDGs. We had a contract with Routledge, and we need to finish and submit the manuscript by the end of this year. I think some of you or many of you are involved in these projects. I think we have already collected almost, not 100%, but 90 to 95% of the entries. So we have more than 100 entries for this guide. Each entry is a short summary or description analysis of a key concept. And so we hope to finish the review and then have the final manuscript ready by the end of this year. And the idea is to publish these products next year. And in addition to this, we also organized a special issue and really trying to encourage our working groups, because we have 5 working groups and colleagues working together in these working groups to publish original research. So there are about a dozen of articles in this special issue. The proposal was accepted by the Earth System Governance Journal. So we are in the process of finishing this special issue. So some articles are currently under review. Some of them are also doing revised and resubmit. So hopefully also by mid-2025, the special issue can be ready. And then these are what we have done so far. Then we are thinking about what we want to do next. This is why we did this survey. And we ask you if you have participated or involved in some working groups. So what were your experiences with your engagement with our task force and working groups, and what kind of activities do you want? Just to briefly to summarize the findings we got. So we have, I think, 23 responses. We got 23 responses. I think. I can see who responded. I think some of you haven't done that, but also some people who are long-standing members of our task force, they couldn't join, but they did the survey. So I think there are some consensus in terms of the activities or outputs that we want. For example, people want to have high-quality publications from our working groups, and also foster collaboration that can lead to this type of publications. But at the same time, I think our members value like in-person, but also virtual meetings such as conferences, workshops, but also other networking opportunities. So I think this is also important. I think we all agree that so having more interactions can help us to get new ideas, and help us to get some good research. And of course, I think there were some suggestions about what we haven't done so far. For example, there was suggestion about the different types of outputs, like short videos, video clips, and then maybe policy briefs. That's something we have also put on the table in our last meeting. We haven't done this so far, but this is something we are going to discuss today. We would like to hear your thoughts, and then to see how we can do this if we agree that this is something we want to do together. And then about the structure of the task force. So what we did at the beginning is to build on what we've done when we were doing the SDG impact assessment, to have these different task forces looking at the different levels of governance. So this is what we have so far. Originally there were 5 working groups, and then the latest addition is this working group on sustainability and interactions and modeling, I think, which is really to encourage interdisciplinary research, because we're also trying to incorporate environmental scientists to our task force. So originally we can see this group or this task force is mainly consisted of like social scientists, especially, I think a lot of political scientists, but also people doing like other social science work. But here, I think we also try to incorporate people from very different background, including environmental science. So there's 5 plus 1, 6 in total working groups. We organize a lot of activities, as I mentioned earlier, in the last 2 or 3 years, 2 to 3 years. But the issue is that we see like some working groups, I think, have more members and have more activities, whereas others, it's maybe more smaller and also sometimes quite quiet, meaning that they don't have a lot of activities going on. So some feedback we got from the survey is some colleagues joined some task force, some working groups of the task force, but they realized there weren't too many activities organized by working groups, so very little interactions. So I think that's something we lead us to think about whether we need to keep this structure or we want to revise or reform this structure. And the other feedback is there is very little interactions between working groups, and sometimes people may have shared interest and also think about the linkages like on different topics and maybe cut across working groups. So how we can encourage that. This is why also we are thinking about what we can do to encourage more like across working group interactions if we want to do that, or if we want to continue with this model of having working groups. So we also know that people may have changes in their career. So sometimes we have so for each working groups, we have co-leads, but sometimes co-leads, they move to a different stage of their career and they can no longer continue this position, so they have to give up the co-lead position. And then I think in some cases, we have vacuum in the leadership position for some working groups, which may explain why some working groups are quite dormant and couldn't organize a lot of activities. This is why we also ask if you're interested in being a co-lead, or if you have any other suggestions. We got a lot of maybe, so I'm not sure whether colleagues are interested or not, or whether we need to find a good way to incentivize colleagues to become co-leads. Of course, we can think about some benefits, but of course, this means also you have to put some time to organize activities. But I think, there are always pros and cons. So there's a question for us to think about, how we can encourage people to lead these working groups if we want to have these working groups or other types of working groups. So I think I don't think at the moment we have a strong consensus from our group to completely reinvent this structure, meaning that we just destroy all working groups and redo it. But I see also some suggestions from the survey that very specific suggestion that we can try to reorganize a little bit or think about different ways to organize our task force. So I think this is probably what we have so far, what we have heard from you. But we want to use these opportunities to have a very open discussion about how we are going to organize our work in the future. So there are a few, I think before I open the floor, I want to put a few options on the table. So the first option is to think about the existing structure, if the majority of our members are satisfied with it. But we know that some working groups are not functioning at the moment because probably the lack of leadership, for example, or other issues. We have to think about how to reform these working groups. And for those who are still functioning, I think we can let go in, or we can try to recruit more members. And this is the first option. The other option is to go to the opposite, to think about, to say this is not going to work, so we don't want these working groups. We can reorganize, or we don't need working groups at all. We just have a task force. And then we see how we can organize just as a whole, as a task force. So these are the two extremes. And in between, I think like middle way proposal would be to think about some working groups can continue, whereas some working groups may not need to exist anymore. Then we can abandon some working groups. Then I also heard from the survey, some people have other ideas on other topics to form working groups. Then we can also take a bottom-up approach. If you are interested, you can propose. Then if you get a critical mass from the task force or bring more people in, then we can think about other working groups, but then we don't need to keep all these working groups at the moment. So these are some like very rough ideas. I just want to put them on the table and to help us start a conversation. And is there anything that my co-conveners want to add before we open the floor? Frank.
Yeah, just to add to your list of impressive activities, from the Utrecht conference, we will also publish or submit a book for Cambridge University Press, which is kind of an edited volume. I mean, Cambridge is interested. We have not yet submitted it, but I mean, we're working on it. And the conference statement of the Utrecht conference, we also work on a publication. I mean, these are two editions from what has happened. And then in the future also, I think being engaged at the UN level is also interesting for such a task force. We have to, of course, find ways to do it, but organizing side events at UN events in New York and elsewhere would also be an interesting activity in the future. Thank you.
From my side, I think just to add that we are quite open for any types of restructuring and ideas from the group, and maybe to just keep in mind what these working groups were about. I think they're quite informal groups dedicated to a specific topic with researchers that aim to collaborate in different ways and exchange perspectives, and that can also grow to joint proposals, maybe also joint publications. So that was the idea, to have a bit decentralized structure. The task force as the umbrella group, where we meet maybe twice a year, and then we have working groups that are smaller, much smaller, maybe 5 people, maybe 10, to work on these topics that we had in the past. And they also had certain function. We had working groups that delivered like fragments for the scoping article. We also had working groups that organized webinars that were then part of a webinar series. And these are now products that have been finished, so to say, and we look for future activities. So Frank just mentioned maybe a new idea to have a working group on United Nations side events or engagement. That could also be something for the future. And then I think Yixian, you also mentioned the idea of a policy brief series. That could also be maybe another item for the future activities, where we have like a task force activity, which is a policy brief series, and then different working groups contribute to such a policy brief series in one way or the other. And the survey that Carole-Anne showed us, and also the discussion in Utrecht, I think highlight and underline that we know so much about what is going on in this area, and we could easily, I think, publish policy interventions in terms of policy briefs in the conversation or in other publication outlets, and that could also bring together the whole task force, just to underline that. And I think these 3 options Yixian sketched are on the table, keeping it as it is, but then we need more people to lead. And second option is to get rid of these working groups and maybe focus on more 3 meetings a year with the task force, or we restructure and find new topics for working groups. We are, again, open for everything.
Thanks, Thomas. And just from my side, so I think so the options are clear. They've been presented. So we would like to hear what is your take on those options. and also, yeah, what you would like to see as events or publication projects, especially for those who did not have the opportunity to answer the survey in a written form. I mean, feel free to also share your views now in the meeting.
Great. I think we have about 45 minutes. I think that's good. John, I see you already have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Some great work that's been done, and I'm sorry I couldn't join you in August. I had a family wedding and some other commitments in that time, but it sounds like it was a productive set of discussions. Something I wrote to the organizers about, but I didn't see mentioned here, is that next year, 2025, we're going to have 5 years before the 2030 target for the SDGs. And it's very clear that we're lagging on all of these SDGs, and we're not going to be achieving most of the targets and goals. So there's been a lot of discussion in the last year about, well, two things. How do we accelerate the goal action around the goals? And the other is, shouldn't we be thinking about maintaining, building the infrastructure, the momentum, the commitments to think beyond 2030? So there are kind of two elements there about that accelerated action at scale, and then thinking about how we maintain the commitments after 2030. You know, what goes post SDG. And I think there's a lot of discussion happening at the UN level about both of these areas, but also whether this group could play a role in thinking about that accelerated action at scale. I don't think policy briefs perhaps is the way to do that. I think it requires maybe some engagements in other ways. I mean, when I look across the membership, there are large parts of the world that are underrepresented, shall we say, in the task force. And there's a lot of and some of those areas are places where we're facing real serious challenges with achieving SDGs, essentially achieving any objectives to improve well-being and so on, sustainability in these areas. So it's a question of whether we could think a little bit differently about opening up and engaging more broadly, but also taking stock of what's been working well. We tried to do that with the volume a few years ago that was produced at Cambridge University Press, but my sense was, because of the timing of things, the literature hadn't caught up to some of the innovation, good practice that had occurred. The academic literature always lags behind a few years. And so it means that we missed a lot of the good stuff, the cases where things were working and where we could be drawing lessons on practice, innovation, scaling of some of these things. So my first thought was, can we take another step where we organize what I would call a set of e-dialogues, shall we say, at regional scale, to open up, to kind of cast the net more widely in Latin America, in sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, so on, and try to get a wider range of insights of where there is good stuff happening, where we can take stock and learn from some of those practices, but also some of those governance barriers that are perhaps preventing that scaling to occur. And then to distill some of those lessons to think about accelerated action to 2030, but also thinking about what goes beyond that post 2030. How do we maintain, or how do we re-engage or enthuse governments, other actors, private sector, to really commit to taking this forward, to not seeing 2030 as an endpoint, but in a sense as a start. This is the launch point to really take things to the next level. So that's one. The other is that the UK government has been working with the UN agencies, with some funding from the Wellcome Trust here in the UK and the UK Research and Innovation, UKRI. And the government of Malawi, I think, has co-sponsored this new initiative called the Global SDG Synthesis Coalition. This is a big initiative, and it's going to be focusing on harvesting available information around, again, some of those where things are working under what conditions. And they've structured things, as you'll see, in 5 thematic areas. They've got technical advisory panels involved with management groups around what they call partnerships, people, planet, prosperity, and peace. And if you go into that, you'll see that they're focusing on specific SDG areas. And although there's some reference to governance-related topics, I don't think that they have the wherewithal, the capacity, in a sense, to really bring some of those governance insights into these working groups. Now, it's very early days. We're at Sussex Sustainability, we're in dialogue with the UK FCDO about making a very small contribution to this. But I've been speaking with my Sussex Sustainability colleagues about this group and saying, with the capacity that exists here in the task force and the wider ESG, with that governance expertise, I wondered whether we as a group here could make a proposal to the organizers about connecting up to these 5 thematic areas and injecting some of those governance insights and related insights from this group into those working groups. So it's a kind of opening things up beyond the proposed areas. I'm sorry, rather big and ambitious and not well defined, but I just think that there's an opportunity here on both of the areas that I laid out, and I'd welcome people's thoughts.
Thanks, John. I could imagine that this could lead or build a foundation for a new working group on looking beyond 2030. So you made many proposals. So maybe if you have also capacities and willingness to lead such a new working group, which might be going out of the global governance working group, then moving towards a post-2030 perspectives group. But let's see other suggestions. So Laura.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to echo what John just shared. So I agree with these 2 visions of accelerating on the one hand and then looking beyond, but also what is the added value that we can bring in as researchers, right? And also you gave a very holistic understanding on, where we stand, what are our knowledge gaps. So really taking that at heart, you said, our knowledge gaps are understanding policymakers' perspectives, the role of the UN. You also mentioned, the need for bridging the science policy interface. So instead of having policy briefs, which are like products that may not get read, I'm thinking more of like what can be roundtable discussions, what can be really nurturing engagements of bringing different people to the table. That can be UN, affiliated people, policymakers, ambassadors, and researchers to, on certain topics, see how can we bring this discussion forward, and how can we, nurture this from also as a researchers. And I agree, I've been actually for the last 2 years part of the evaluation synthesis that contributed to the people pillar that was just mentioned by John. So again, the UN is doing that. The UN, they reached out to all kinds of stakeholders, civil society, researchers, I was one of them, but many different stakeholders, and engaged us over a 2-year period in coming in at strategic moments of this evaluation synthesis, which was on SDG 5. But again, thinking what are co-creative processes that we can engage, like if we think of also future research outputs, what are co-creative processes? How can we make those processes more rigorous by bringing in stakeholders, also being cognizant of their limited time and overbookings? But so yeah, I will leave it at this, but thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Could be another one, could be another working group on co-creation processes. In addition to a working group focusing on UN engagement, maybe also it could be merged, and then not post-2030, as Marianne mentions in the chat. We should more talk about advancing sustainable development by 2030 and beyond, which is, I guess, also official language, and maybe better to, raise not false expectation that we are finished by 2030, which will not be the case. Highlighting also what John said about looking beyond. Anyway, so other ideas, comments regarding new working groups, also maybe statements that we don't need them anymore. Everything is most welcome. Please, Mark.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I do think that I agree with John that this topic of beyond thinking beyond 2030, this is a very important topic. I'm interested to cooperate with this. We do have to keep in mind, though, that I think the current proposals, like by Jeff Sachs and others, are to extend the SDGs. My institute, we were involved in the creation of the SDGs, and I really worry a lot that if the negotiation is reopened, then the result may be like no SDGs, because I think a certain number of governments, they actually don't like the SDGs. They did not want, and especially in advanced developed countries, they preferred like a much scaled down MDGs plus. They did not support the original SDGs. They went along with it after the momentum developed faster than they expected. But this is a real risk, and one thing needs to be to like persuade governments that they even that they should extend the SDGs. So so this is a kind of a key issue. If people talk too much about making the SDGs more ambitious and reopening the negotiations, and there's a big push for this, the governments could react by just canceling. But I think it's maybe okay for the academic community to talk about this, but also I think the Secretary General is discouraging like a lot of official discussion about after 2030 for a while. Long point that I think, or a couple of points that I think the academic community could work harder on is, first of all, the reasons why we're not having enough progress on the SDGs. Most research it looks at the level of progress, or this the previous Earth System Governance research looked at has there been a political impact, but like why there hasn't been achievement officially looked at, and some hypotheses have been commonly talked about, like COVID-19 and wars, but not looking into governance reasons for this. And the second point that hasn't been researched, again, a little bit surprising from a governance perspective, is like what countries have been doing to implement the SDGs, meaning specifically policies on healthcare, the policies on environment, and nobody's really looking at these. So I think these are, political scientists used to look at this, but now they don't anymore. That's kind of surprising to me. But anyway, so I think there's a lot of research that could be done. And then like what working group to put it in, could be, various ones. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Joanna?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of answers or suggestions, but I do have just some insights, I think, that I've gathered in the last 2 years or so of trying to see what kind of interests there would be broadly in terms of focusing on private governance, and in particularly around sort of the management and organization studies field and business schools. And I think there's a couple of sort of high level things that I think we could consider or find relevant. In particular, the fact that the UN system or the multilateral system has one primary conduit for sort of considering private governance, which is through PRIME and through UN Global Compact, and that there aren't a lot of forums outside of that for them to understand or sense make the role of private governance in the SDGs. So I think there's a bit of a vacuum that that could be better filled by the work that we do, in the sense of positioning this as an interdisciplinary sort of approach to thinking about private governance and implementation of the SDGs. And I'm thinking particularly back to Radboud, how many postgraduate students we had who were really interested in doing interesting work that was at the nexus of industry and supply chains, industry and carbon capture, right? And but didn't come from a management business background at all, but were doing a lot of important work around that. And so I think there's a way of sort of convening that and positioning it to have more to say to a global community about what it would mean to interrelate beyond the way it's traditionally thought of, which is largely UN Partnership Accelerator, the CSSI network, which of course has a lot of overlap with individuals here doing work on partnerships. So that's kind of my first sort of high level insight. The second is I have done a lot of networking and talking to people who do a lot of interesting work that is at this nexus. Jan Bebbington at Pentland Center at Lancaster University, for example, who has done work with Rockstrom for many years and is like 20 years on in terms of being in sustainability science from a business school perspective. And, thinking about those conversations, I think that there's will to engage, but there just isn't bandwidth in terms of moving beyond those business spaces where they're existing. So there's something too about there needing to be perhaps like a flow of cross-pollination, even in terms of information sharing. And I think we've talked a bit about this in terms of, even a feed, right, of information flow that we could share where people can post. I mean, the most basic version is a WhatsApp group, but there's broadly lots of better technologies for doing that as well. But a way to sort of try and, because I'm happy to package those things and share them back in those directions, which is what I spend a lot of time doing. But I think there's kind of more formalized ways that we could develop those networks and not expecting them to spend the time, et cetera, to engage here physically to do that. And then I put in the chat in terms of response to Mariana that there is still a lot of confusion over the SDGs and this thought that they'll expire. In this book I'm co-editing on leadership, again, it was titled Beyond the SDGs. There still is widespread thought in sort of top management scholars that they're not even going to necessarily use the SDGs in the chapters they're writing for us, because in their heads they're going away. So just to say that I think that that information flow is getting worse, not better, and that it's really critical. Rob Van Tolder reminded us in Utrecht that we cannot achieve the SDGs without business, period. It will be impossible without that partnership. So the ways in which we can consider creating a better flow of information, flow of knowledge, flow of relationship, as Laura was saying, between that, I think that could be something we pay attention to.
That's a plea for continuing the working group on private governance and partnerships, I guess. But let's maybe, since we still have time, perhaps I give over to Yixian. We might have a chance also to continue this discussion in smaller groups.
Yes, and I think, I think we would like to do that. But Fred, I see you have a hand up. You have something to say very quickly, or?
Yeah, thanks, Yixian, and to some degree, I also agree with Jana. But for me, there's a sort of a broader question, and that's sort of obviously raised by Frank and many others early on, and that was the question of this idea of governing through goals. How effective is that? And I think it's perhaps worth for us collectively within the task force, but also across the other task forces, to reflect on that model. And I say that being also involved in the task force on the nature of as of governing nature, biodiversity, and what I see perhaps problematically is perhaps the wider proliferation of goals. We have the 30 by 30 goals and targets on the biodiversity side. We have goals on the climate science side, and in lots of other domains. And my worry is that sort of the initial benefits of governing through goals is increasingly being diluted by the fact we're just having more and more goals at international levels, filtering down into national levels. And I think that's also then somewhat reflected in the private sector, where the questions are, well, how do we translate that into what we do? And never mind that the whole acronym of ESG in the business and financial sector has its own complete political discourse and challenges. And so I think maybe sort of a wider reflection across this task force and other task forces on how do we govern this effectively, the public sector, the private sector, the interactions between these. What is the governance model, more generally speaking? Is there a hierarchy of goals that requires reform or some form of streamlining? I think it's just about getting your head around all this, sort of the scientific and political realities of everything that's being proposed and thrown out into the real world, and yet at the same time we sort of see not a lot of progress, in some ways pushback, and it is challenging, no doubt. Just wondering if we could initiate a reflection on the general governance of all these issues across the SDGs, across these important environmental and social issues, and what alternative models can be proposed that may feed into some world of post 2030, but or more generally allows us to make progress. So that's just sort of my plea and my comment.
Okay, thanks. That's a very good suggestion. So I'm just mindful of time. I see we have also a lot of junior scholars, maybe a bit shy to speak to the whole group. So what I'm going to propose, we're going to have breakout rooms. We'll have 4 rooms. So each co-convener can join a room, then we can listen to what you want. So that means in each room we have about 6-7 people from our members of task force, and then we have, let's say, take about 15 minutes, and then we can come back to conclude the session. All right, but I'll announce when the time is up. I'm going to open the room so you can join your room. Okay, welcome back. I'm sorry we didn't have enough time, but I think I'm very mindful of time. That's why I had to close the breakout rooms. But I hope at least we had opportunities to listen to everyone or get a sense of what people think about our work or some suggestions. I think we have another 5 minutes. Maybe we'll just have a very quick conclusion, and by listening to the discussion, so summarizing the discussion of each room if we want. So maybe I'll just invite my co-convener, and then if you have members in your room, very quickly to add a few things. But yeah, we only have like 1 minute for each. So Thomas, how was your discussion?
It was great. And we had discussed different things, but we also identified an increasingly heated debate about sustainability. So we cannot assume that sustainability is convincing for everyone. So we also have to do more. I think we also see that there's a backlash movement. We discussed some examples. We'll not go into detail here, but it seems to be a bit of a cultural war about sustainability and the SDGs going on. That is what we discussed. Giving over to the next, I guess.
Yeah, the next one is Carole-Anne.
Yes, thanks. So also great discussions and suggestions within the group. I think there's quite a consensus, I would say, to keep the working group approach, maybe by like reforming some of them, changing the themes of the working group. And related to this, we discussed that we could have a working group that would be dedicated specifically to researching SDG implementation in a Global South context. Also trying to bring networks from civil society, from new members of our task force. Massimo mentioned that he could make that connection, so that would be great. Thanks. And again, also other good suggestions to try to implement maybe a place-based approach to the task force. So trying to have some representatives within specific regions and have regional groups, and this was mentioned by Hirsto. So use this place-based approach as well in our organization. And that was it.
Thank you. I think these are very interesting but also useful suggestions. Frank, you have anything to add?
I think we had a fantastic discussion, and I want to make 4 points in 1 minute. Number one, maybe organized activity could be a working group that goes outside the SDGs and discusses goal-setting processes in other governance domains, such as climate, biodiversity, and the oceans was mentioned, which also would mean then reaching out to task force within the Earth System Governance Project that are discussing these kind of issues where goals becoming more important. That was one. Number two is looking at the entire 2030, post-2030 context, where also maybe pre-negotiated targets might become more important. It would also mean like reaching out to other groups maybe. So this entire what is next on the SDGs could be an interesting activity, could be a working group also. 3, how do you talk to policymakers? How do you engage in partnerships? How do we get together? Policymakers might not really understand the SDGs properly. How is these kind of interactions with the policy world happening, and what could be improved on that level? Also with those of us like Alex who are working with decision makers in more practical contexts could be interesting. That was mentioned by 2 colleagues in a way. And fourthly, the link to a regional approach, for example, Sub-Saharan Africa, but could be also, as Carole-Anne's group has mentioned, looking at the Global South per se. There's, of course, a question of scale. I mean, how many people do we have in our community to discuss either continents or countries or the entire Global South? But SDGs in the Global South could be an interesting topic for a working group within this network. Thank you. Fantastic discussions. I learned a lot.
Thank you. That's great. And just now I'm briefly reporting the discussion in my room. So I think 3 points to highlight. The first, I think, echoing other groups on the question of nationalization, localization of the SDGs. Think about national context or local context. So I would say this, I think this aligns with the suggestion of having like regional groups or the people doing work on different like regions, and I think that's something we can think about. And the second, a very interesting proposal is to think about another impact study and to look at the impact of SDG, maybe different types of impact by 2030. So that's something we can also think to think about the long-term, more like a long-term project, but I think that can also bring the whole task force together. And then finally, to think about how we can share the data we gathered or the knowledge we produced in the whole task force. So I think sometimes the people have done fantastic work, but other people do not have access. Also, we can also share the data we gathered on SDGs and learn from each other. I think that's something for us to think as well. I think overall, I think this is really helpful. I think that we got a lot of suggestions. I think we need to digest on our end as co-conveners, and then I think we're going to make some proposals to get in touch with the whole group, and then I think we'll take from there. Thank you everyone for joining today's meeting. I do realize that an hour and a half is not sufficient for our group, but we try to have I think more engagement in the future.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all also from my side. Thanks.
Bye now.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the ESG forum. So Blake, do I need to end the meeting or I just leave the meeting?
Yeah, I forgot you were the host. You can just end for all then.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Yixian.
Thanks.